Next speaker, Bronwyn Sheehan, is an angel. Please welcome to the TEDxBrisbane stage, Bronwyn Sheehan.
That's lovely. Well, hello everybody. Wonderful to be with you this afternoon, and a complete honour to be amongst so many amazing people. I am not really an angel. Actually a very ordinary person. I am a mother of 3 children. I started my career as a nurse and a midwife. And then 5 years ago, possibly in the most busiest time of my life, I decided that I would form a children's charity, call it the Pajama Foundation, and look at ways that we could positively influence the most vulnerable children in Australia, and that is the children who are in the foster care system. Currently in 2008, which is the latest figures, there was 31,000 children in care in Australia. And in a country as brilliant as Australia, I think that that is quite frankly shocking. And what are we doing about that? Not only is there 31,000 children in foster care in Australia, but there's about a pool of 65,000 children that will move between care and home. And just to clarify what foster care is, it's when children have been removed from their natural parents because of abuse and neglect, and they're put in another family, and that family has been trained and has been heavily screened, and then that family will care for the child. Children enter the care system for 28 days, for 12 months, for 2 years, or until they're 18. So it's a very mobile system. The children are very mobile in amongst that. And at each of those time periods, then the child's case is taken back to court, and they decide whether the child will stay in foster care or they'll go back to their natural parents. So the lives of kids who are in care is quite complex. I think we have a notion, or particularly I did, that a child enters foster care and there they live happily ever after. Well, it's not exactly like that. The stats around these children is very frightening as well. 92% of these children are below average at reading at age 7. 50% of the homeless come from a care background. 75% of these children don't finish school, and 35% of kids who are in foster care will enter the juvenile justice system at some stage. So when I formed the Pajama Foundation, I wanted to do something that could have a lifelong impact on these children. So what we do is we screen, recruit and train volunteers, and they're the angels. They're called Pajama Angels. And I match up my Pajama Angels with a kid in foster care who they visit on a weekly basis. And they read books aloud to them, they play educationally focused games, they help them with their homework, and they're a stand for that child. And I'm so proud of the work that my angels do. If there is something in regards to laws of attraction, then the Pajama Foundation has attracted the most amazing volunteers. In the last 5 years, we have had 1,300 people through our organisation, and we're currently reaching about 1,000 kids each week on a weekly basis. So my Pajama Angels will stay with that foster child, and certainly a lot of my volunteers have been Pajama Angels now for as long as our organisation, so 5 years, and that's hugely positive for these really unstable lives. Kids who are in foster care will move placements a lot. For example, we had one little guy come into our program and he was 9 and he'd never been to school. That's when he entered the care system. And so he went into grade 4 at school, and guess what? He couldn't survive in grade 4. He was dropped back to year 3, and then he ended up in the special ed unit. which is so tragic for these kids who have had such a rocky start to their life. His Pajama Angel was with him for about 4 years. She moved with him. In 2 years, he had 5 foster care placements. So my Pajama Angel moved with this child 5 times, which is an extraordinary commitment from my volunteers. The reason why the Pajama Foundation, I am not a teacher, I haven't been a kid in care myself, but I got to meet a foster carer and I was totally blown away by her commitment and her self-sacrifice. She was a lady probably in her 50s. She'd never been on a holiday. She'd never spent any money on herself. Yet she had raised about 100 children through her home over a 30-year period. And so I really got to, I suppose, reflect on myself and my attitudes towards life. And my husband and I were on wealth creation path and looking at, well, hang on a minute, you know, what do we do? Do we just look after ourselves in this life that we have, or do we contribute to others? What are we really here for? The day Jackie is this foster carer and she became a friend of mine, and about 6 years ago when I was visiting her, she had a little guy in her arms and he was 18 months old. He'd just come into care and he had the worst cold that I'd ever seen and the biggest, brownest eyes. All my kids have blue eyes, so I've always wanted to steal a kid with brown eyes. And if your eyes are the window to your soul, then you could see right into this little baby's soul, and he had experienced enough for one little person. It was January in Brisbane and he had come into care with a Coles plastic bag of winter clothes, and these were his worldly possessions. And the reason why he had winter clothes is because his little 18-month-old body was covered in bruises. So I think it was at that moment I decided to be a stand and a voice for these kids who are our Australian children. All research suggests that the single most, the research behind literacy, both nationally and internationally, is vast. Reading books aloud to children is an official way that we can improve their literacy skills. We've got some really great Australian authors, children's authors in Australia. Mem Fox is one of my reading ambassadors, and she says that every child should have 1,000 books read to them before they learn to read themselves. So I've taken that on as my life goal or my life purpose, is to make sure that all the 31,000 children who are in foster care get 1,000 books read to them, and then we can see what direction they can go in with their educational future. And it's just like Chris was saying, you know, I have a dream for these kids. They've had a really rocky start for the beginning of their life, but I think if we can immerse them in books and immerse them in the love of learning, then they can have great outcomes as well. Andy Griffiths, another very cool Australian author that I get to hang out with when he comes to Brisbane. He's written books like The Day My Bum Went Psycho and Just Tricking, Just Disgusting, Just Joking. He started his career as an English teacher, and he started writing books because he got to see that the grade 8 boys in his class weren't engaged in reading. And so he started writing material, hence The Day My Bum Went Psycho, to engage these boys into reading. He talks a lot about bums and poo and all really great stuff that boys love. And that's how he engages them. But then after that, when you've got them hooked in, then you can move on to other literacy text. My volunteers are the Angels. They're the backbone of our organisation. The profile of my volunteers is quite interesting. Most people assume that they're little old ladies who have retired who want to read books aloud to children. Actually, it's quite the opposite. My volunteers are, the profile of my volunteer is 25 to 25 to 35, female, university degree, 75% full-time employment. So these are perfect role models to have with the children, and certainly all my volunteers have come to my organisation to contribute and to give back to the community. And what most of them don't realise is that, or they soon do realise, is that they get far more out of this than certainly what the children do, because really to give is to receive. And they're not my words, but they're the words of my volunteers. So what do the kids get out of it? Well, they say that kids who have had a traumatic background, all they need is one person to be a stand for them in their life. And I'm very convinced that my Pajama Angels are certainly that one person for a lot of these children. One of my favourite stories is he was then 19. I had a young 19 engineering student who came to volunteer. I thought he was there to impress his girlfriend, but 5 years later he is still reading, and I've matched him up with a little boy in care, and I'll call him Harry, and he's read to Harry now for 5 years. He was only 2 when he first started reading to him, and Harry calls him Pajama Pete, and Pajama Pete's a bit of a star. He's actually quite cute. I wouldn't mind if he came and read books to me. But Harry was only 2 when Pajama Pete started reading to him. And these children aren't used to the whole read aloud experience. So when he was 2 years old, he couldn't sit still and listen to one book. 6 months later, he could sit still and listen to 6 books. 2 years later, he wouldn't leave home with his favourite book in his hand, The Three Billy Goats Gruff. And so I say that Pajama Pete has positively steered this little guy's academic future in a positive direction. When he was 2, because of abuse and neglect, this little guy was diagnosed as disabled, and he's just recently been assessed again, and he's no longer labelled disabled, but he's learning impaired. So with Pajama Pete, I know that has Harry and Pajama Pete will be together, I think, for a very long time, and it's just a fabulous example of the humanness of my organisation and of my angels. And certainly I think this has been an amazing journey for me. The idea of reading books aloud just kind of came to me one day, and I knew that we wanted to do something, but this idea just popped into my head. I think it was, from the results that I've seen with my own kids. But I never knew that this would work just quietly as well as what it has. And I think it's the humanness behind it. I don't know if humanness is a word, but I just made it up anyway if it's not. But it's something very special that we're bringing to these children. And Harry's foster carer says that Pajama Pete brings 2 very strong messages to this child. And one is that men can be trusted, and the other is that men read. And that is a fabulous example of what is possible for these kids. Certainly my dream would be that foster children finish school, that a foster child will go to university, and that one day the foster child as an adult might look back and reflect on their childhood and think that it was tough, because you know what, their childhood is tough. But they might think that, once a week a Pajama Angel came and read to them, and that was fantastic. And I think we all need wonderful childhood memories, and that's what I want for these kids. I want them to have wonderful childhood memories. There is, I think in today's society, it's very busy and it's very complex, and one of the most important things that we can teach our children is how to relax. And certainly the gift of reading, I'm sure, has been installed in a lot of you. I'm sure you've got your favourite childhood book, And now there's a lot of children who are in my program that have their own favourite book as well. So in 5 years we have expanded throughout Queensland. We're on Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Toowoomba, Ipswich, Bundaberg and Cairns. I'm currently negotiating with the New South Wales Government and Victorian Government about rolling out nationally. And certainly, you know, this journey for me has been way beyond everything that I've ever dreamed. 12 months ago, I was at the lodge having morning tea with the Prime Minister, and he welcomed me at the door and said, "Hello, welcome to my home, please come in." And I'm thinking, does he know that I'm supposed to be here? Like, you never really know, you know, what's possible for yourself to achieve. I've always dreamed really big, but my dream's not for me. My dream is for the most vulnerable kids in Australia, and I think that makes my dream so much easier. I never really take no as a no. Maybe it's not yet, and certainly my Pajama Angels are the backbone of our organisation. I'd just like to leave you with a quote from a very famous author, and I'm sure you're familiar with his work. His name is Dr. Seuss, and Dr. Seuss says, "The more that you read, the more that you know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go." And my dream for children who are in foster care is that they will read. And my dream for children who are in foster care is that they will love learning. And that is what I call my program, the Love of Learning program. And my dream for the kids in foster care in Australia is that they'll have places to go to too. Never underestimate what's possible for you to achieve. Work hard, laugh loud, and never underestimate what is possible for not only yourself, but for others to achieve. And thank you so much for your attention today.